So maybe you've heard about Dutch farmers protesting over emissions. Their government is basically saying, you got to do all this stuff before 2030. Doesn't it seem like 2030 happens to be the magic date for everything involved with the environment? Interesting, right? Now, you got these Dutch farmers lighting bales of hay on fire. They're protesting. At least they're lighting their own stuff on fire. I give them credit for that, right? Now, they're pissed off because their government is basically saying, you need to do all this. And if you can't comply, then maybe your business needs to get shut down. And these farmers are like, what? What do you mean? Maybe you haven't heard this story. That's all right. We're going to talk about it today, right here on News for Reasonable People. Let's get into it. Believe it or not, I am reading from ABC News. ABC used to be solid. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just because I was a kid and I watched a lot of ABC. NBC, CBS. Okay, I watched a lot of sports on CBS. They carried the Seahawks, who were terrible when I was a kid. And that's why I'm no longer a fan, because they were terrible as a kid. And as an adult, they got better. And I'm like, no, screw them. I spent too many years supporting a terrible team. Now that they're all famous and everybody's, 12th man, no, can't be part of that. The Hague, Netherlands. Farmers protested around the Netherlands as lawmakers voted Tuesday on proposals to slash emissions of damaging pollutants, a plan that will likely force farmers to cut their livestock herds or stop work altogether. So you got this thing, we need to take care of the environment. All right, how about eating? Eating is good too. I like eating. How about having enough energy to heat people's homes? People like to have warm homes in the winter, or homes that aren't absolutely freezing. What was it Dave Chappelle was talking about? You know how I knew the white family was, just basically doing better than our family was? In the winter, they didn't sit around with their big coats on inside. And that was something to me. It was like, okay, yeah, no, I never wore my coat. I was told by my mom to put on a sweater so many times, but it's true. Wear a sweater, wear an insulating layer inside, and you don't have to have your heat turned up to like 73. Yeah, some people live like that, but got to have heat, right? Well, not everybody has that. Not everybody's going to have food if we keep going this direction, right? Government says emissions of nitrogen oxide and ammonia, which livestock produce, must be drastically reduced close to nature areas that are part of a network of protected habitats for endangered plants and wildlife stretching across the 27-nation European Union. All right. Kind of reminds me of the spotted owl in that song, Wipe My Ass with the Spotted Owl. I mean, that was a real thing. I'm not making that up. But, here in the Pacific Northwest, logging is such a huge part of our economy over the years. And then all of a sudden, we've got a spotted owl. We've seen a spotted owl. Therefore, you can't develop here. As tractors gathered outside the Parliament building, Prime Minister Mark Rutte, don't know how to pronounce that, moving on, said farmers have the right to protest, but not to break the law. Where have I heard that before? Something about peaceful protesters and whatnot that weren't so peaceful. Freedom of speech and the right to demonstrate are a vital part of our democratic society, and I will always defend them, Rutte said. But it is not acceptable to create dangerous situations. It's not acceptable to intimidate officials. We will never accept that. Well, we do here. I mean, the left does. They totally accept violent protesting. That seems to be the call. What is the government proposing? What are they talking about here? The ruling coalition wants to cut emissions of pollutants, predominantly nitrogen oxide and ammonia, by 50% nationwide by 2030. There's that 2030. If I didn't know anything better, the year 2030, if I didn't know anything better, I'd say we're in collusion to do a bunch of crazy stuff by 2030. What's going on here? Does kind of make you go, doesn't it? We're all going to be driving electric cars by 2030. We're not going to sell any cars other than electric cars here in the state of Washington by 2030. Is that realistic? No, It's not. It's a pipe dream. And yet we're all being forced into this ridiculousness. Ministers call the proposal an unavoidable transition. No. It is avoidable. You can avoid it. You're choosing not to. An unavoidable transition that aims to improve air, land, and water quality. It's kind of like the Biden administration going down this, well, we all need to be driving electric cars. Electric cars are damn expensive, right? They're expensive. So a lot of the folks that voted for Biden and his administration, they're not going to be able to afford electric cars. And yet everybody's being forced in this direction. And it's like, okay, yeah, how's that going to work out? They warn that farmers will have to adapt or face the prospect of shuttering their businesses. There's not much give and take here, it feels like. And I think that's why the farmers are protesting. The honest message is that not all farmers can continue their business. And those who do will likely have to farm differently, the government said in a statement this month as it unveiled emission reduction targets. Some of this, and research for this podcast, some of this has to do with they are farming on some pretty small parcels of land. They're doing some pretty dense farming, right? So, okay, but does this really need to happen right now? Kind of feels like everything's being thrown on the bandwagon environment. It has to do with the environment. And therefore, you just get a hall pass. Okay, well, we're going to move this one on through. Livestock produce ammonia in their urine and feces. The government in the past has called on farmers to use feed for their animals that contains less protein as a way of reducing ammonia emissions. Science, never my strong suit. All those formulas and stuff. The problem is compounded in the Netherlands, which is known for its intensive farming practices with large numbers of livestock kept on small areas of land. There you go. All right. So does this really have that much of an impact on the environment? Now, some environmentalists are going to say, of course, why would we want this not to be part of our deal? Well, I go back to food is good. I like eating food. Now, Bill Burr's got that. He's got that bit where he talks about, I realize that unless I'm vegetarian every single day, it's going to require some animal being killed in order for me to sustain myself. All right. I like food. I like eating food. I like protein. It's not only farmers being targeted. In the past, the government has also cut the national maximum speed limit on highways from about 80 miles an hour to about less than that, 100 kilometers. So that would be 100 kilometers converts to 62 miles an hour, roughly, right? During the day as a way of reducing nitrogen oxide created by vehicle engines. How come we driving so slow? Saving the environment. Yeah, that's what we're doing. Just drive really slow. Just drive like 5 miles an hour. I'm doing my part. Saving the environment. The government has been forced to take action after a series of court rulings that blocked infrastructure and construction projects because of fears they would cause emissions that breach environmental rules. All this environmental stuff. Yeah, right? I mean, hey, don't leave garbage on the road. Clean things up. Make things as good as you can. But there's going to be a limitation to what you can and can't do here. And I think the earth has a way of kind of healing itself and doing its own thing. And we've got these cycles of weather that kind of happen. And maybe right now we're in a cycle where things are a little warmer or a little colder, depending on the environment. It's giving provincial authorities a year to work out ways to meet the emission reduction targets. So that's what they're doing. And that's why these farmers are pissed. All right, how are we going to farm? So what are the farmers doing? Some 40,000 farmers gathered last week in the central Netherlands agricultural heartland to protest the government's plan. Many arrived by tractor, snarling traffic around the country. Kind of like the truckers in, where was that, Ottawa, Canada? Yeah, that was cold though. Man, that just looked horribly cold. Canada and their response to whole COVID thing, just ridiculous. And now we've got a shortage. We've got a shortage in just about every single damn industry because we're still droning on about COVID requirements. And everybody's getting it. If you haven't gotten it by now, everybody's getting it. All my friends that are, not 100% on the right. And I have a lot of them because, I'm reasonable. And it is really entertaining to have some of them come down with COVID, and then they can't even really admit that that's what's going on. Oh, I just got sick. And you're like, tell me about it. What happened? Well, I went traveling, came back, tested positive, but don't worry, it's just like a cold. I've been vaxxed 45 times and I had 17 boosters, and so it's just like a cold. When I talked about COVID being just like a cold and, like a heavy cold, when I talked about that back in 2020, my podcast got demonetized because of misinformation. And now literally everybody is saying the same thing. Hey, it's not that big of a deal. And a lot of us were all saying that back in the day. If you look at the stats, if you look at really what's going on, vaccinated or not, it's the morbidly obese. It's people with pre-existing conditions. They're the ones dying. So, but now we've kind of come full circle. And the vast majority of us don't wear masks. We don't do any real protocol. Although I was in the grocery store like yesterday, and I looked around and like me and one of the checkers wasn't wearing a mask. And I was like, oh, well, I mean, there is still COVID going on, but if I get it, it's kind of like a cold. So, and I've already had it. It was like a bad cold. It's not a cold that I'd want to get, but I also don't want to get the flu either, right? So yeah, there's that. That was a fun couple of years, wasn't it? So some farmers set hay bales ablaze Tuesday along highways while others gathered in towns and cities. All right, hay bales ablaze. I'm okay with that. Because unless it catches fire and burns a town down, that's not cool. Some have dumped hay bales on roads. Small groups demonstrated at town and city halls. Basically, peaceful protesting. The polar opposite of Black Lives Matter and Antifa, summer of 2020 through today. The opposite of that. The opposite. Let's be clear. Farmers argue that they are being unfairly targeted as polluters, while other industries such as aviation, airplanes, construction, building stuff, and transport, getting stuff to and from, also are contributing to emissions and face far less reaching rules. They also say the government is not giving them a clear picture of their futures amid the proposed reforms. It's kind of like Biden flying around in Air Force One saying, you need to be driving an electric car, not guitar, by 2030. You got to drive one. I'm still going to fly Air Force One though, because that's, safety and all that. I got my own teleprompter on there that I can read all the words on. Yeah. The government has published a map with reduction targets across the country based on proximity to areas designated as, I'm getting bored. Are you getting bored? Listen to this. Yeah. There are Natura 2000 sites across the 27 member states, covering 18% of the block's land area and yada, yada. Okay. So you got some greenbelt areas. I love a good greenbelt. You know why? It increases a property's value. You've got a buffer there in between the house and the next door. Privacy, wetlands. Yeah, you got animals roaming around. The deer can eat. Okay, that's great. But you still got to eat. So there's got to be this balance somewhere. And that's where I feel like we're just like taking these hard lines environmentally that don't necessarily need to be taken. But if you hear the other side talk, you're like, oh, you said that about the environment? Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. Yeah. I like animals too. They're delicious, right? On its website, the European Commission says conservation and sustainable use of Natura 200 areas is 2000 is largely centered on people working with nature rather than against it. However, member states must ensure that the sites are managed in a sustainable. Okay, I'm really bored now. What else is good here? So why is this all important? Well, according to a national farming lobby group, there are nearly 54,000 agricultural businesses in the Netherlands, with exports totaling 94.5 billion euros in 2019. So it's a big part of their gross national product, right? Farming. Who knew? And you always think of Netherlands and dikes and the things to hold water, that whole thing, right? So you always think about that. And you do think about farming. I mean, you do. You've always got the windmill. You think about that. Dutch farmers, they settled a whole bunch of land here in the Pacific Northwest. I went to elementary school with Dutch farmers' kids at a small private school in Monroe. They were tough kids. They were farmers. They're like up way before me ever, working on the farm. They're out. A lot of them were dairy farmers. They're tough kids. They're strong because they're hoisting around farm equipment and stuff. You know, I'm running around with a BB gun in the woods trying to shoot stuff. Yeah, it's just the way things were. So, yeah, I really feel for these farmers. They are being caught in kind of the crosshairs of today's obsession with the environment. It's like, all right, we still need to get business done. We still need to have food to eat. And yet we're going down all these roads of, all right, let's do this. And this makes a lot of sense on some level somewhere. It's about the environment, so it's got to all be good. So much of this stuff, I kind of look at and go, really? This is what we're doing? This is a solution to that problem? A lot of it I just don't buy. I flat don't buy. And I get, when I start to read these stories about what is happening to actual people producing food for said economies, you're like, okay, I understand there are some industries that are going to have a tough time, like the coal industry. I mean, all right, you know, or some industries that are just, you know, really rough on the environment that we relied upon for years and years and years. There are some of those industries. Farming, okay. Well, you know, they've got too many livestock on a farm because they're doing dense farming. How much is this really going to impact the environment in a positive way? That's where I'm like, I don't know. Unless the earth is just absolutely rolling up and saying, yep, no more. We're not doing any of this. I say, just keep going. Try to be as responsible as you can. Yeah. Eat organic. No, we're not even going to go down that road. Although I do choose organic if I can, because I've bought the whole thing that organic is better. I mean, I just think it is. And when I do my own gardening, I need to have, you know, pesticide free and yada and yada and yada, only because I want my crop to look better. And I believe that it will look better. It probably won't, because my crop does not look all that great right now. My butter crunch lettuce or whatever the F it is doing terrible. But I'm told it's because I'm growing it in the direct sunlight. And right now it's a blazing hot 80 degrees here in Seattle. So it's probably going to kill my crop. But yeah, I'll see what I can do. The Dutch farmers, they don't have the option to see what they can do. They're going to get shut down. It'll be interesting to see how this goes and see if these farmers doing these protesting, setting their bales of hay on fire, if it has any impact on the government's decision. It probably won't, because it feels like we're just being ramrodded in these environmental things. And we are. Any which way, if an update comes up, I will share it for you right here on News for Reasonable People. Thanks for joining. Love to have you subscribe, do all that good stuff. We'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.